It Chapter 2 is once again directed by Andy Muschietti and stars Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Isaiah Mustafa, and Bill Hader as Richie Tozer. So what's the story? It's been 27 years since the Losers Club first defeated Pennywise. Flash forward to present day, and it turns out that they did not defeat him for good, and he is back with his evil murderous deeds. So Mike, played by Isaiah Mustafa, aka the Old Spice Man, calls each of his old friends one by one to say, hey, it's time to defeat Pennywise for good this time. The main selling point in this movie is hands down the casting. Each one of our stars looks and acts exactly like their child counterparts. The big standout is, without a doubt, Bill Hader, who in the first movie was played by Finn Wolfhard in Stranger Things. Anytime Bill Hader is on screen, he steals the show with his one-liners and tension breakers. And it's not even in an obnoxious sort of way, it's just that he's genuinely funny and he's played by such a talented comedian. And that's not to say that Finn Wolfhard is bad, it's just some of the immature jokes seem to come across better with Bill Hader delivering them. While Bill Hader is definitely the standout performance in this, he isn't the only actor bringing his A game. The adult versions of Eddie, Ben, Beverly, Mike, everybody is incredible. Most of the emotional heavy lifting is done by Bill, who in this movie is played by James McAvoy, who you might know from Split and the X-Men franchise. He's dealing with a lot of guilt because of what happened to his younger brother in the first movie, and this movie goes very deep into his psychology and how he's able to go through that guilt and overcome it. Great writing of this character paired with McAvoy's performance does a really great job at bringing the tears with the fears. I can't talk about it without also talking about Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. Bill Skarsgård kills it just like in the last movie, and in some cases, he is even more frightening because he has to work even harder to terrorize these main characters because there's no longer just kids, now they're adults. However, this does segue into some of the problems that I have with this movie, because as much as I enjoyed myself, it is not without its faults. For one thing, as scary and well performed as Pennywise is, some of the CGI is a little spotty, and he's oversaturated to the point where he's no longer scary. Like, if you have him lurking in the shadows and only coming out every so often, he's super frightening. But whenever you see him in scenes where he's just walking around in broad daylight, he's just no longer scary anymore. These sequences with Pennywise brings me to my next issue, the pacing. This movie is nearly 3 hours long, and you feel that entire 3 hours thanks primarily to the second act. In order to defeat Pennywise, our main protagonists have to find these like relics from their past, and so it brings up this weird emotional trauma thing. And it's this weird rinse and repeat cycle where it's like, oh, a character has to go to a creepy abandoned place, find said artifact, get terrorized by Pennywise, leave the place. And then the next character does the same exact thing. And this whole ordeal takes a good 30 minutes, and while the sequences in themselves are very scary, it feels like homework. Personally, if I were to make this movie, I would have done it so that each of these scenes are shot sort of side by side. So like maybe you would hop into James McAvoy hopping into one scene, and then Beverly starting her thing and just kind of cut in between it, and it would create a much better sense of urgency. And what's even worse is after all our characters find their little relics and they go into the big showdown, it's almost like they're all of a sudden in a hurry to get the movie over with. And just add insult to injury, they add certain scenes from our main characters whenever they're little kids that would have done better in Chapter 1. But I guess they were like, hey, if we make the first one as super tight and urgent as possible, we can kind of pick up the slack in Chapter 2. Because if we have them sold on the first movie, they will no doubt come back for the second one. I thought that it was going to be one of my favorite movies of 2019. And it's got a lot of good stuff going for it. It's got great casting, especially with Bill Hader and James McAvoy. And they elevate this movie to a higher playing field than it would have been without them. The villain is still frightening, but suffers from oversaturation. And the movie overall suffers from a lengthy runtime, a slow second act, and a rushed third act. Despite its flaws, it's a terrifyingly entertaining experience that'll make you either clutch your seat, shed a few tears, or get a good hearty laugh or two. And I'm gonna give It Chapter 2 an 8 out of 10. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm Higgs, this has been my flick, and I'll see you next time.